Do you want a weekly dose of energy and marketing tips to grow your business? Then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Lisa Pezik Show, a podcast that empowers entrepreneurs to heal and be heard, the permission to pivot, and the tools to design a life you love.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Lisa Pezik Show. We are Lisa times 2 today. I am so excited that we've got Lisa Simone Richards in the house, and we're going to be talking about visibility, PR, debunking who it's for, who it's not for. Is it not for anyone? I don't think so, but we'll see. Maybe not. We're going to dive into this mythical unicorn that I know some of you have been reaching out to me and saying, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with PR. Do I have to hire this massive agency and pay them $1 bajillion to have some of these opportunities that I want? And we're going to dive in and talk about that today. So Lisa, before I introduce you and tell them who you are, welcome to the podcast.
I am so psyched to be here. I'm so excited to share some information and maybe debunk some myths like you were saying. And your energy's on fire. My energy's on fire. This is going to be lit.
This is amazing. All right, so let me tell you about Lisa. So she works with coaches who struggle to break through the noise and get more eyes on their business. She shows them how to get seen online everywhere without spinning their wheels on social media. Yeah, and I love that because I feel like as entrepreneurs or business owners, we all kind of get to that place where we are spinning our wheels. No matter what level of growth, like it's right before that part where you're going to break through to that next level. And you're like, is this really the way? Do I have to be doing all these things? And am I maximizing my time? And what am I supposed to be doing? And typically visibility is the piece that suffers when we're spinning those wheels. So to start, just tell us, how did you get into doing PR and really seeing this niche and this need to go in this direction?
Okay, so I'll tell you about 3 chapters in my life very briefly. First one was when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I had a subscription to a magazine called Teen People, if any of the listeners remember that one. And I remember seeing the letters to the editor section, and I thought it was really cool that you could write a letter and then it would show up in the magazine. So I was in Brownies and Girl Guides at the time. I knew how to write up an envelope. I knew where mom kept her stamps, and I wrote a letter to the editor all by myself and mailed it in. So fast forward 3 or 4 months, Teen People comes in the mail. It's a turquoise cover. Jonathan Taylor Thomas from Home Improvement was on the cover wearing a red t-shirt. And I opened up the magazine and I saw my letter to the editor in there. And I just was floored to see my name in print. Like I was like 12. I thought that was so cool. So that was my first introduction to media and having a thirst for communications. Fast forward to first year university. So this is around 2002, I believe. And I'm having lunch with a girl in 4th year who's graduating. She was in my sorority and she was going to PR school. So keep in mind, this is around when Sex and the City was in its heyday. Blessed it and Just Like That finished. I'm so sad those 10 episodes are done. Come back for another season. Anyways, back to 2002. This is when Samantha Jones makes, if you're familiar with the show, yes, she made PR look so sexy and cool. The outfits, the parties, like the exclusivity. So I was like, I'm going to do that. So I ended up working in fashion and beauty PR for a few years. I lived that Devil Wears Prada lifestyle, worked with beauty brands, got to have my articles published in a magazine. And I ended up working with a big box agency like the one you had mentioned just now that cost $1 bajillion. Some of our clients included Staples, Virgin Mobile, Crayola, so some really big names. I even got to meet Richard Branson. But now fast forward one more time to about 2015. And this is when I saw a lot of people leaving their very safe 9-to-5 jobs where they were making good money, 5-6 figures, maybe more, but they were leaving to take a chance on themselves. They wanted to do something that they were passionate about and get it into the world, except they didn't know how to actually market themselves. And they couldn't go to an agency like the one that I used to work at because they'd be like, yeah, 100% we can represent you. It's $10,000 a month, a 12-month retainer, just sign here and you're good. Not feasible. So I started off having my own PR agency for a handful of years. I'd work with clients on a 3-month retainer, maybe something reasonable like $2,500, $3,000 a month. And long story short, at the end of the time together, they didn't have the relationships. They got the exposure, but they didn't have a skill that they could use over and over again. So what I really love to do is share with people, this is how you do it. Like these individuals and your listeners, everyone who's tuning in right now, you're probably incredible at the service that you offer, But if you can't be the best kept secret and do well. So my mission is to make sure that these independent business owners who've taken a chance on themselves know how to market themselves and have a lather, rinse, repeat strategy for leveraging other people's platforms to get more visibility.
I love that. You're like the end of kind of our client journey. So we make sure that everybody has what they need, that when they go out there and they get featured in all these places, when people start to see them and check them out, their business looks and sounds incredible and is working for them the way they want it to be working for them. But I'm wondering if you can talk about this myth maybe, or like debunk or give us some truth around. A lot of people think it's a once and done, like if I make it on this podcast, then I'm going to be a millionaire, right? Or if I make it on this TV show, then everybody's going to see me. And I don't think it always works that way. So how does that play into visibility and PR?
Yeah, here's what's really funny. So typically when people come to me, especially when I had an agency, the first thing they would want, I want to be on Forbes.com. I want to be on Oprah. And that's all well and good. It's great for authority. No questions asked. It's credibility building. It gets your name out there. It solidifies you when someone Googles you, but that might not be the thing that puts dollars in the bank. So let me give you a real life example. So I worked with clients here in Toronto, Canada. Their names are Doctors Marco and Paulo De Chiantis. They're what do you call them? Chiropractors. That was their title. And their first PR opportunity was on one of Canada's biggest daytime TV shows called The Social. For the Americans listening, think about it like The View. You have the 4 hosts talking around, sharing ideas, different segments throughout the course of an hour. So that was their first time on TV. They did 3 segments. They ended up getting paid actually to come on national TV and talk about their craft, which is amazing. Great exposure for them. However, they also just had, at the time, 1 location here in Toronto. So if you lived all the way on the West Coast in BC and you were watching that segment, it was really cool, but it's not like you could actually walk in the door to do business with them. Right. So when we would do local TV shows, so like Rogers, volunteer run, it wasn't a big production. That's when they'd actually see more dollars in the bank, when they did that hyper local show that got in front of their market and the people who could walk in the door. So I think one of the things to be crystal clear on when you're going for visibility is, what is the intention? And typically I like to frame it in one of 3 ways that I call the ABCs of visibility. Is your intention for visibility, number 1, to build awareness so that people actually know who you are? B, is it to create a buzz? A lot of the time, if you have a course coming out or you're launching something, people can't just hear about it once. You need to be all over the place, kind of like when a movie is coming out. Or C, is your purpose to establish credibility? Because that's when, if you're in a stage where, I really want to elevate my name. I want it to be said in the same sentence as the mentors that I look up to, the people that I have followed. That's when you're looking to build credibility, and it may not be the same type of visibility that's going to help you build brand awareness. So that's why it's so important to know what's the point first, and then to design a visibility plan that supports it.
Begin with that end in mind, which I know we've heard before. And I love that, because we're 2 Canadians. Well, I'm originally from Pennsylvania, but I'm dual citizen now, so I can call myself Canadian.
We'll have you as a Canadian, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for accepting me and keeping me here. That Wayne Gretzky quote, like, you got to skate to where the puck is going. And I think, how much does that play into when you're planning that end in mind? Where, like, I think about people say, I want to get on this really popular podcast, or I want to get on X, Y, and Z, but is that where your clients are? Like you said, is that like, why? It always goes back to that why, like, why are you doing this? Is that kind of like a first question that you have with people, or what's like the first thing they should think about when they want to start using PR to either get that credibility, like you said, or get clients based on what they want?
It really is literally, what is the intention? What's the purpose, and determining if you're A, B, or C. I very much remember being on a sales call with a copywriter back in May of last year. And she was in the stage of, she was just getting her business started. She worked with online business coaches who are, just writing their first funnels and sales sequences and whatnot. And she was sharing with me, Lisa, I would love to be featured on, and I'm going to butcher the name of it. I can't remember the name of this podcast, but let's imagine it was called The Copy Chat, if you will, like the best copywriting podcast of all podcasts that all of the people she listens to are featured on. And I had to say to her, okay, but what I'm hearing you say is you want clients who have the ability to pay you right now. And those clients who are just right in their first sales funnel and just getting started in online business are not so knee deep in copy that they're listening to copy podcasts.
Yeah.
They're listening to online business coaching podcasts. And beyond that, does it make sense, knowing that you want to stand out as a copywriter and attract clients, to be on a copywriting podcast where now you're just in more noise? Everybody on here is a copywriter. So what makes you stand out and what makes you special? Why would someone choose you? Wouldn't it serve you better to get on like an online business podcast, be the person who is talking about copywriting? So now as they're listening to episodes about sales and marketing and social media, when they hear copywriting, guess who they're going to turn to? You,
Yes.
because you stood out. So that's why intention is always the first thing for me, because nothing's worse than getting a huge feature somewhere and not getting the result that you were hoping to. So it's all about the strategy first and foremost.
Amen. Amen. You're speaking my language. So what are the kinds of things then that people need before they, or do they need anything before they go and do that reach out? And how do you get picked out of the sea of people that are all submitting to go on that podcast or show or TV show?
Yeah. You know, for a lot of people, it really depends on the stage of business that they're in. So I have some clients right now who are just launching their first program. They don't have a website yet. And when they do reach out to shows, the host's like, well, who are you? I can't creep anything about you. I would like to know who you are before I say yes to having you on my show. So if you're someone who literally is starting from scratch, this is the stage where I say, take advantage of social media. Go on Instagram, do a story talking about what you do and what you want to create, something around 3 minutes. So at least you can send that to somebody so they can get a sense of who you are. To be clear, that story isn't bringing clients in for you. Don't post it and think all of a sudden, well, Lisa said to do a story, I should have clients now. No. The purpose of that is so that when someone comes to research you, they have something to know about you. For those of us who may be further along in business, we are established. We do have our websites and various presences down there. Some things I like to make sure of when I'm pitching, first and foremost, and this is for anybody, it always has to be about value. Don't reach out to anyone and say, hey, I'd love to come on your show and talk about my offer. Would that be cool? No, come and talk about value. What are the listeners going to take away from it? So I think when you come in leading with value, no matter what stage of business you're in, that's the thing that's going to make you stand out. Show that you have paid attention to this person's platform before, whether it's a podcast or a television show or a website. Reference episodes they may have released, reference articles that you have read. Show that you're not just using them for access to their platform. Create some sort of connection with them, comment on the things that they're putting out there to show this isn't a copy and paste blasted email that's being sent to everybody. So really taking the time to understand the individual you're putting yourself in front of, how they want to serve their audience, and then leading with that value to help that host fulfill their mission. Those are things that'll totally make you stand out from everybody else.
I love that. I always say I use that like 3-tiered approach of like, here's who I am. Here's who you are. I know who you are, what you care about, what's important to you, and here's what we can do together. And you're right. A lot of people miss that. Here's who you are. I've done my research into you. I know what you care about. I know what your values are. Piece. It's always about who am I? And that's the wrong way to do it. Here's who I am. Here's what I can offer. Here's what I have going on. Here's what's in it for me. Nobody's going to have you on until they know what's in it for them and what you can do together. So I love how you debunked that and really brought that into light. To back up for a second and talking about PR, what are all the ways, like when I think about PR, I think about podcasts, TV, radio. Like, what are the other methods or what are some other visibility pieces that our listeners could be thinking about?
Yeah, let's sort it into like 3 neat little categories for everyone to follow along with. And this is what I like to call the ladder of publicity. So picture a ladder and I'm going to have you walk up the 3 different levels. So at your bottom beginning level, as you're just starting to get on, this is where I suggest written media. So what this could be is guest blog posting for somebody else. Note, I said guest blog posting, not blogging on your own site. We want to leverage someone else's platform. This could be writing for another website. This could be being interviewed for a magazine or a newspaper. So again, this comes back to, I believe in having a healthy media mix, because people like to consume content in 3 different ways, whether it's reading it, listening to it, or watching it. So this is why the ladder is structured the way that it is. So when you're on that bottom rung of written content, this is where, you're just starting to get out there, you're filling out your message. Maybe that inner perfectionist is like, ooh, we can't hit send on that yet. Oh, but what does my partner think about that? I need to send it to somebody else. Oh, I need to edit that and read it later. This is why I suggest people start with this, because this is the one time your perfectionist can win. You can write that guest blog post, come back to it 48 hours, make sure you love it before you hit send. But this is a really good way for you to feel confident with what you're putting out there, because you're not necessarily on the spot. I always love to give a tip alongside of it, so that this isn't just great information, but there's something that people can do. So when you're looking at, okay, I would love to write an article for a prominent website that gets way more hits than mine. Also, if someone Googles my name, they'll see I've written for other places. So if that's something that you're thinking about, my first recommendation is to go onto Google and type in "Write for Us," WRITE for us, and whatever your industry is. Write for us money, write for us relationships, write for us nutrition, write for us keto. The results are going to come up with a bunch of sites looking for guest expert contributors on the subject that you contribute to. Going back to what we were talking about before, Lisa, is it going to be Forbes.com or Oprah that's looking for this? Probably not. It's not going to be the biggest, sexiest names that you know in the industry, but you're just getting started. So get your foot in the door, learn how to, and you will be able to graduate and ascend to those bigger levels. So first level is written media. Next level up is audio media. So this could be being featured on a podcast, like the conversation we're having now. It could be being interviewed on a local radio station, or, an international one. It could also be hosting or moderating a room on Clubhouse. So this is an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody else, refine your messaging, get clear on, what you want to convey when you're speaking with somebody, but you don't have the pressure necessarily of being seen. Sometimes with podcasts, you're on video, which I personally do prefer, because I can see the host cues. And if they're about to say something, we're not tripping over each other's words. Sometimes the video is shared publicly. Sometimes it's just internally for the podcast and the guests. But in any event, typically you're not necessarily going to be seen when you're pursuing these audio platforms. Third level up, which I'm sure you could guess, is now visual media and being seen. I love this the most because you're creating connection with people. They can get a sense of who you are and your energy and your mannerisms, and they can decide if they like you and if they're attracted to you, which is totally fair. So examples of visual media, traditionally this would be television. But moving into, the new age, this can be so many different things. It could be going live in somebody else's Facebook group. It could be doing an Instagram story on somebody else's profile. Let them turn on the live and invite you to join them, so it notifies their audience. It could be speaking on live or virtual stages. It could be guest training in somebody else's mastermind. There are so many different ways to be seen beyond the traditional stuff that I was doing 20 years ago when I worked for an agency. So it could be social media, very well so, but the point and the purpose of all types of visibility that I'm talking about, again, comes back to leveraging someone else's platform. There is somebody out there who has a crowd of your ideal clients hanging out, listening to a podcast, reading a blog, and members in a Facebook group, watching an online show. How do you figure out who the gatekeeper is? How do you position yourself with value to that individual so you can get access and now show up in front of a ready-built audience of the people that you want to reach?
I love that. And it's just, it takes me back to the conversation we had before we hit record, where you said to me, how come there's a little bit of a gap? And I was saying how I was doing my solo show, and then I took a little bit of a break. But if you remember what I said to you, I said, but when we met, I really like the value that you give. So I want to have you come in and have this podcast, even though I'm kind of on a little bit of a podcast break for, 2 months or so, 2-3 months. And which I've never taken a podcast break actually in the entire, since 2017, since I started. This is the first time I know, right? So I'm like, I deserve
You get to have a little mini vacay.
But it goes back to, I think sometimes the objection people have is, well, why would someone, like, I can't reach out. Everybody imposter syndrome, and they get in their own head and they're like, I can't ask to go, in this person's mastermind group or this person's Facebook or write a blog for this person. And yes, you can, as long as you're delivering value. right? As long as you're serving and delivering value, even when people are on a break or maybe not even wanting to do that, they'll go, you know what, that's really going to serve my audience. And as you said, that's a win-win for everyone. Win because you're leveraging their already trusted, built community, and a win for the person because they know they're giving great value and they didn't actually have to be the one teaching. Someone else is doing the teaching and the serving. So it's a win-win. Oh, I love that. It's so funny how we're going so fast through this podcast because listeners, like we, neither one of us like take a breath. Like we're both like, la, 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 la.
And I haven't even had a coffee yet today. I actually haven't eaten yet, period, today. So this is just naturally my energy when I'm like, I need food and coffee.
You're high on life. I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. Okay. Are there any, other than, not obviously being salesy, and which we should never do in any aspect of life, you never want to operate from, buy my stuff, it's all about me. Are there any other PR don'ts that are like big gaps or mistakes or things?
Yeah, for sure. So the number one mistake we've already covered. The number one mistake that I see is people just making it about themselves.
Yeah.
And, even a small thing you can look for is if you're reaching out to someone asking if you can do a guest blog post or be on their podcast, after you've written that email for the ask, skim down the left margin of your page and look at the beginning of those paragraphs. How many sentences begin with I, me, or my? That's a good litmus test to know if you're making it all about you or if you're talking about the other person and leading with value for them. You can say the exact same thing in two different ways. It would be one thing for me to reach out and say, hey, Lisa, I've been a publicist for 20 years and I have this course and I've created this result. Or I could say, hey, Lisa, this is so funny. The second person saying Lisa, but not to me. I know that your listeners have worked so hard to build their business, but they haven't done it just to stay the best kept secret. Having worked with organizations like Staples and Virgin, et cetera, I could help them actually figure out how to get more visibility without paying millions of dollars for it. Would that be interesting to them? Saying the same thing, but notice that really subtle tweak, like literally rewind this podcast by 30 seconds. And that sentence began with your listeners have worked to do this thing and here's how this can help them. So just a tiny little shift like that can have such a difference on the person who's receiving and reading that information and getting to know you for the first time.
And I remember when you reached out to me, you said you're going to share the ABCs of visibility and the ladder. And that's what we always help people build it with our agency and our company is you've got to have something that's signature to you, or you've got to have a system or an approach, or that perks people's ears up when you're sharing a process or something. Other than just like, I like to talk about money. I like to talk about relationships. I like to talk about, again, the it's not about that. It's what value is that listener going to get, and how can you present it in a succinct, organized way? Because I would imagine the last thing a podcast host, a TV producer, they're not going to want somebody that just kind of gets on and blabs and isn't well put together. Not saying you have to be perfect and say every word right, but you've got to know how to succinctly get across your information. And I think that adds more value when in the way that you present yourself. So do you work with people? So after they get the spot booked or the whatever it is that they're doing, do you then work with them on how to like craft their message, or what's that? Yeah.
Sorry, I had a heart attack as you said that because I'm like, wrong order. We need the message before we do the pitch.
Right. Yeah.
So I definitely work with people. The big thing is, I think for a lot of online business owners and business owners in general, they feel like I have to come up with this new message all the time. And literally, I want my clients to be so bored of listening to themselves talk. Do you know how many times I have talked about the ABCs of visibility and the ladder of publicity? And that's fine. I'm hearing it all the time. But as long as I'm getting that content in front of new people, it's new to them. So something that I work with my clients on is creating their signature success system. So your ABCs of visibility, your ladder of publicity, the 5 P's of positioning, publicity, and profit. I got a bunch of them. But that, and you know what the truth is? I know a bunch of other people in visibility, and you know what? Their systems don't sound that different from mine. We have talked about it because you know what? A lot of us are teaching something very similar. So there is going to be overlap, but we each have our own defined, branded way that we talk about it. Rebecca Caffiero, who I know, who also does PR and visibility, she has her pyramid of publicity, I think she calls it. I have a ladder of publicity. It was funny for us to talk and be like, oh, we say the same things in different ways. So it's not to say that like, yo, there's someone already saying the message that I want to put out there. I know plenty of people who are saying the same thing that I am, and it doesn't shut me up for a day. There is a value in the way that I communicate. There are certain people who are going to be more attracted to me than others, and I have my own special flavor or sauce and way that I position it. So there's absolutely room for everybody who's listening to this thinking, I wonder if there's space for me out there. Of course there is. Figure out what your personal sauce is, your method, your blueprint, your formula, whatever it is, and then package that. Like I've been talking about my system since 2017. They haven't changed.
Yes. I always describe it to our clients as like Lego pieces. And then you've got your kind of set Lego pieces, or you have your system, and then you just pull how you want to put it together based on whether you have a 90-minute workshop, a 60-minute keynote, a 20-minute TED style thing, a 3-paragraph blog post, a 45-minute podcast. You kind of pick and choose what pieces make the most sense, instead of always, like you said, do not always be trying to recreate, because then you're an expert of nothing. You're just trying to create new content to sound different. But that never works out than when you just stick with what you know, who you are, what you do, and that signature system, however you've created it, and sticking with what you know. It's not always about being more broad and adding more things. It's going really deep with what you do know and you do.
And it really is about having that consistency, because I think one of the gifts that I have is sometimes I like to think about other people's perspective and how they may be seeing it. So I'm thinking about, for the podcast host who's receiving my pitch, what's coming up for them. For the person who's thinking about working with me, who's heard me on a podcast or two, you know what they're going to do? They're going to Google me, because before I go for lunch, I Google a restaurant. So if someone's thinking about spending thousands of dollars to work with you, they're going to do their research. And if they can see that I've been on 20 different podcasts and I'm talking about the same thing, and they listen to a bunch of episodes, by the time they've booked a call on my calendar, they already know my systems and my processes. They've half enrolled themselves. I don't have to do the work for that. But also I'm creating a level of consistency and trust for that person, because if they search my name and they see me talking about like marketing here and email there and social media there, they don't know what to come to me for. So for you to create that consistency for yourself, that creates a certain level of like, I'm just thinking about having my credit card out, searching someone, seeing that they're known, they talk about this thing over and over again. Okay, I can trust them. I know that this person's an expert. They've obviously made their mark. They've been seen all over the place. They're not just on their own social media platforms or websites talking about what they do. All right, I can trust them. And even if they charge a little bit more, you know what, that's fine. They position themselves as premium and not just like every other coach out there. So that's why it's so important to keep leveraging other people's platforms, having that consistent message that you're always handing out, so that you can build that trust for the people who want to believe that you're the person for them. So help them know it.
I love that. And that always debunks when people say to us, like, do I really need to do social media? And do I really need that media page? And do I really need that speaker page? And yes, because exactly what you said, we are in a digital age where everything is done, or most of our stuff is done from our phone, with answers to our questions fingertips away. And that's what people do. It's not like the yellow pages where people used to call up and say, I'd like to hear about your services, right? You're right. We look at social media, we look at podcasts, we look at their website, we look at we Google search their name and see what shows up. And that's how we make our decision whether we're going to hire that person or not. So that presence and that visibility and having those asset pieces in place are so important. So my final question for you, what's on the horizon for you? Like, what are you excited about? What are you building? What are you doing? Like, what's going on with you for the rest of this year?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Is this a personal or professional context? I'm like, what are all the things?
Both, all, whatever you want to share.
Okay, let's do a little column A, a little column B. I always joke that I just say way too much about myself and I'm so TMI, but whatever, get to know Lisa, decide if you like her or not. This Lisa, not the other Lisa. So one personal thing I'm looking forward to is moving in with my husband this year. We got married in September. We're recording this in February and we still don't live together. We're looking for a home, so I'm very excited for that. And one thing I'm professionally excited about is, again, you know, we were talking about that consistent message, that lather, rinse, repeat strategy, that thing that's going to bore you and make you tired of listening to yourself. I have that for myself. For the last 6 months, every other month or so, I host a free 2-day training. I'm actually going to extend it the next time around, so it's not so jam-packed for people who don't run at the same speed and energy that you and I do. But I do a free workshop teaching people, here is how you get visibility. Here's how you come up with your messaging. Here's how you come, actually, it's literally in the order. Figure out what your messaging is, figure out what your signature success system is, figure out the right platforms to be seen on. I literally teach that all for free in a 2-day workshop. Now we're going to make it a little bit longer, but I'm definitely looking forward to hosting my next one in March. Dates to be confirmed.
Cool. I will make sure when you send that to me that I will get that in the show notes for any listeners who are tuning in. That sounds fantastic. And I just want to honor you for the generosity of that. Because that's a piece that I always teach people in our company is you got to give, you got to be generous. Like that's a great way to build trust. And I don't know many people that are doing a 2, possible 3, or however long this workshop is for free.
Oh, I'm stretching out to 5 days for free. And, you know, I think this is actually really interesting information for people who might struggle with, you know, if I give all my information away, like, number one, you're not going to, but like, would people still hire me? And when I ran my workshop the last time, someone hired me specifically because she said, I love how generous with content. I can't believe you just gave all of that away in 2 days. Like, I would love to be able to give. And I was like, if I got that from you in 2 days, what am I going to get from you in 6 months? So that's why I love to be generous with information, because there's so much that I can share in a half hour. There's so much that I can share in 2 days, but for me to have a long-term lasting impact is going to take a little bit longer. So don't hesitate to be generous with your content. And I think something to keep in mind for people who might struggle with that is I always like to lead with the intention. We talked about that at the beginning. I want to leave people richer than they came. Whether you sign up for my workshop, whether you sign up for my email list, if you ever hire me to work with me, regardless, at the end of this episode, you have learned something. You can go on Google and type in "write for us." You can think about the 3 different levels of publicity. You are better off, regardless of if I ever get anything out of it.
Not only are our names both Lisa, we operate from the same generosity and principle. And that's why I know we're going to be around for the long haul and the long term, because we are putting out good into the world. Lisa, thank you for just your energy, your generosity, your tips. This is definitely a podcast that I know listeners go back, re-listen to this, do it in chunks, take notes, use this as your guide throughout the year to become more visible and to strategize your message and your approach. And go to Lisa's workshop for 5 days when she has it. It sounds incredible. You will not be disappointed. It sounds like it is exactly what I know many of my listeners need. So Lisa, thank you for being here with me today.
So grateful to be able to come on and share this information. And, you know, while I'm still figuring out what the March dates are right now, I do know that if you are interested in signing up for that free workshop, it's available at www.finallygetthewordout.com.
Nice. Amazing. And I will make sure that is in our show notes, as well as your LinkedIn, your Instagram, your social, your website. All the goods to you will be in the show notes. And listeners, thank you for being here and tuning in. I know that you come here and you tune in because I have great people on the podcast. We put out that cutting edge, cut through the noise. Here's your action plan. Here's what you need to go do. So that's your assignment. That's your homework. Take this podcast, set a plan, go do. You know, you've got Lisa ×2 in your corner if you need it. Thank you for being here. And we will see you next time on the Lisa Pezik Show.
You've been listening to the Lisa Pezik Show. Let's connect more at www.lisapezik.com.